Expectations can be a double-edged sword. They can lead to pleasant surprises and bitter disappointments, but one thing is for sure. It's hard not to have them. When I set out to make a retrospective on the Sonic the Hedgehog series, I went in with an open mind, determined not to let my biases color my experience with it. But even with that goal in mind, I couldn't entirely shake off my preconceptions. I expected Sonic 1 to be an ambitious start to the series with a few growing pains, and I expected Sonic 2 to improve and expand on what came before and iron out some of the clumsiness. I happen to be mostly right in those assessments, and you can check out my videos on those games to hear more. But as I went into the next game in the series, I found myself completely at a loss as to what I should expect. Sonic CD is often overshadowed by its contemporaries. I wasn't even aware of it until very recently, and all I knew about it going in was what could be gleaned from the title, so this was brand new territory for me. But I was excited to discover more. This was the whole reason I started making this series, to experience Sonic firsthand from beginning to end. One thing to note before we begin though, I played Sonic 1 and 2 on an emulator, to avoid paying for the official versions because I'm cheap and broke, but also to experience them as authentically as I could, without hunting down a Genesis. For Sonic CD, however, I had trouble finding trustworthy emulation, and I like to pay for the games I play anyway, especially now that I'm making content with them. So I bought Sonic Origins, and that's how I played Sonic CD. This is the only version of the game that I've played, and I'm fairly confident that it's a faithful port, but there may be some differences that impacted my experience that I wasn't aware of. With that said, let's see what the odd child of classic Sonic has to offer. It's clear from the moment you start up the game that Sonic CD is different from what came before. The title screen is more realistic, for lack of a better term, and just speaking from first impressions, I don't like the change. The bright colors and smooth shapes of Sonic 1 and 2 have a timeless charm that's missing here, making it seem aged in a way its predecessors avoided. But that's not what sticks out the most here. Part of the reason I didn't trust the emulations I played is that I just couldn't believe this music belonged here. It sounds too good for a Genesis game, like, where's that classic 16-bit crunch? But remember, this is Sonic CD, and thanks to the higher storage capacity of CDs compared to cartridges, it's possible to include high-definition music, and, as we'll see in a moment, cutscenes. This makes Sonic CD one of the most impressive games for its time, and it definitely wears that on its sleeve. I'm not super interested into digging into the background behind the games I cover, but it's pretty obvious that this game was made for two primary reasons. The first would be to sell CD add-ons, as a mainline Sonic game is sure to ship units, and the next would be to show off what that add-on is capable of, as its flagship title. It certainly accomplishes that second goal, as there's a level of polish on this game that surpasses even Sonic 2. The graphics and animations are smooth and sharp, and of course the audio quality is crystal clear. The high-quality music paired with the retro graphics can be a bit uncanny, but it's certainly impressive and gives this game a unique identity among its peers. In my opinion, the soundtrack overall is not quite as strong as that of Sonic 2, and it lacks the retro charm of its compatriots, but there are some excellent tracks in here. When I was looking up some of these songs, I discovered that there are actually two separate soundtracks for the Japan and US versions of the game, which is weird, but after listening to both, I do find that I heavily favor the US soundtrack. I particularly enjoy the themes for Tidal Tempest and Wacky Workbench Zones, and Sonic Boom is of course a classic. Speaking of Sonic Boom, that's the song you'll hear during the opening cutscene, which is quite simply delightful. I love this animation. It's so fun and simple, and it realizes Sonic as a character in a fantastic way, perfectly translating his attitude and charm inherent in his appearance and in-game behavior into a more tangible form. There's not much of substance here, it's just Sonic the Hedgehog doing what he does best. After this cutscene, we're given control, and Sonic CD officially begins with Palm Tree Panic Zone. This game returns to the level structure of Sonic 1 with 3 acts in each zone, but don't panic because the third act of each zone is just a boss fight. The levels are laid out in much the same way as previous games, with lots of verticality and opportunities for speed and exploration. There are some new level features that stand out, however, like these loops that change the perspective and these quaint little past and future signposts. We'll discuss those in a moment. As we near the end of Act 1, Sonic bumps into a cute pink hedgehog who falls immediately in love with him, because I guess he's just that hot. This is Amy Rose, and this marks the beginning of a decades-long saga of Sonic spurning her romantic advances, as he speeds past the goal and leaves her in the dust. I wasn't blown away by Palm Tree Panic Zone. I personally found the song to be pretty obnoxious, and I'm not the biggest fan of the visuals. Emerald Hill and even Green Hill were more exciting introductions to their respective games. That being said, it does do a good job of showing us what to expect, and it introduces many of the little quirks that make up Sonic CD's gameplay. Controlling Sonic is the same as ever. The spin dash returns from Sonic 2, and it is joined by a new ability, the peel out, or dash. This allows you to attain even greater speeds from a standstill, though it's a bit riskier since Sonic isn't curled into his defensive ball. It's incredibly fun to use and makes you feel like a real pro when utilized correctly, and the animation is awesome. This will be a crucial ability, as achieving and maintaining high speeds is integral to Sonic CD's gameplay. Remember those signposts I mentioned? You can run right past these without a second thought and beat the game just fine, but by doing that, you would be missing out on a key part of the experience, and what makes Sonic CD such a unique and interesting game.
Pine trees. Time travel.
By activating a past or future signpost and hitting top speed, Sonic will start to sparkle. If you take damage or lose your speed in any way, you'll miss your chance and have to find another signpost. But if you can maintain the speed for long enough, you'll be zapped into the past or future. On some levels, this is a trivial matter of running off in pretty much any direction for a few seconds, but on others it can be quite difficult to avoid losing speed and require you to find specific areas where it's more viable. Speed is the core concept behind Sonic's gameplay, and CD definitely uses it the most creatively so far. But the time travel is more of a passing novelty or gimmick. Each level in the game is split into 3 different variations based on the present, past, and future. The present is obviously where you start, your typical Sonic Zone fare. The future is a dour, mechanical wasteland, but most importantly there's the past, a lush, natural landscape. Eggman has sent machines into this past to do something that will alter the timeline and bring about the apocalypse you see in the future levels. In order to truly beat Sonic CD and get the good ending, we have to travel to the past in every single level and destroy a Metal Sonic hologram, and this thing, which the internet says is a robot generator. The end screen of the level will say Sonic made a good future instead of Sonic got through act such and such, which is how I feel every time I get home from work. I don't think I've made a good future once in my life, must be nice. But if we succeed in this task in the first 2 acts of each zone, then when we face the following boss battle, it will be in a healthy landscape full of happy critters instead of the robotic dystopia. Do this for all 8 zones and you get the good ending. A la Sonic 1, it's just a slightly altered cutscene, but unlike Sonic 1, it's actually fun and rewarding to do the work itself. Sonic CD's levels really lend themselves to exploration, and it's a real challenge sometimes to meet the speed requirement for time travel, making it very satisfying to pull off. Overall, this mechanic is a bizarre, creative twist that turns Sonic CD from just another Sonic game to a unique and fascinating experience. That being said, it is still a Sonic game, so what's the rest of it like? Well, after Palm Tree Panic comes Collision Chaos, where our newest groupie is promptly kidnapped by Sonic's robotic doppelganger. Why? Who knows? Maybe he's got a secret crush on Amy, maybe he mistakes her for someone Sonic cares about, which she most definitely is not, or maybe he just hates girls. Whatever the reason, Sonic doesn't want that on his conscience, so it's up to us to save her. Probably. CD has more of a story than its forebears, but it's still fairly inscrutable. As we move forward, we learn where Collision Chaos gets its name, and Sonic learns just how bad a headache can be. The next zone is Tidal Tempest, followed by Quartz Quadrant, and as I'm writing this script, I'm finding that I'm struggling to remember these zones, and that's because they largely aren't that memorable. Sonic CD borrows a lot from Sonic 1, and that includes the more abstract level themes, as opposed to the more concrete, identifiable themes from 2. That's a shame, and more so because I think this game in particular would have benefited from some more creative theming. The bad futures for these levels don't have much impact because I don't have a clue what these places actually are, like, what's so good about this and what's so bad about this? It's a nitpick, I know, but as someone who loved the direction Sonic 2 took the series, it's disappointing to see it take a step back. Another thing that returns from Sonic 1 is the bonus stages, and by that I mean how you access them. Reach the goal with 50 rings and jump into the giant spinning ring. Thankfully, the stages themselves are nothing like the ones from the first game. In true early Sonic fashion, it's more pseudo 3D, and it is of course pretty difficult to navigate. The hazards are just flat sprites on the ground, kind of like Super Mario Kart. The goal is to destroy the UFOs hovering about, but they too are just sprites moving around in a 3D space, making it very difficult to gauge their exact position and time your jump right. I struggled a lot with this at first, as you can see, but once I got the hang of it, these levels were a surprising amount of fun. It's both challenging and engaging to navigate these flat levels and avoid the water, which drains your time. It's incredibly satisfying to destroy the UFOs, and some of them are pretty tricky. When I'm rewarded with a Chaos Emerald, I feel like I've really earned it. I was not expecting to enjoy these levels as much as I did, and it was a real incentive to hold on to my rings and get a chance to play them. Fun fact, you can also achieve the good ending by getting all of the Chaos Emeralds, if you're just not in the mood to hunt down time-traveling robots, so that's a nice choice to have. So what else is there to discuss? Boss fights are similar to what we've seen in past games, but there's more emphasis on them, as they each have their own level dedicated to them. Eggman has really amped up his evil factor in this entry. He's animated in a way that makes it look like he's grotesquely bulging out of his suit, and the anxiety-inducing song that plays during the boss fights starts with an unnerving evil laugh. Metal Sonic, on the other hand, turns out to be kind of a pushover. You face off against him, not in a boss fight, but a race, with Eggman bearing down on your tail with an insta-death laser. I say it's a race, but it's more just a matter of being ahead of him when you reach the goal. Yeah, that sounds like a race, but hear me out. If you fall behind, he slows way down, and if you pull ahead, he speeds up and tries to attack you as he passes by. So just going as fast as you can probably won't do the trick, since he can always catch up to you. I beat it by staying close to him and racing ahead as we approach the goal. The door closes and he, being very stupid, slams headfirst into it and apparently dies. Now only Eggman remains, who is waiting for us in the final zone, Metallic Madness. Much like Sonic 1's Scrap Brain, there's nothing real exciting that sets it apart from the rest of the game. That goes for the final boss as well, which Sonic dispatches with ease. Just as the whole place begins to explode, Amy shows up and wow, look at Sonic's face right there. He's like, oh brother. But in spite of his misgivings, he rescues her in the ending cutscene before ditching her once again and chasing down a fleeing Eggman. Then we're treated to an animated retelling of our exploits throughout the game, and that's the end of Sonic CD. Sonic CD, above all else, is a very weird game. It isn't at all what I expected, and it plays with some extremely unique and creative ideas. On paper, it sounds like this shouldn't work at all, but it does. I played through this one a couple of times to make sure I was experiencing everything, and I had a really good time with it. Out of all 3 games I've played, this one might be the most fun to actually play. There were a few bits that I didn't enjoy, like the ridiculous bouncy floor and wacky workbench that made navigating and exploring the levels a nightmare, and sometimes searching for the time-traveling robots was a bit of a drag. The theming is weaker than perhaps even Sonic 1, but the visuals are solid and the soundtrack is excellent. Amy Rose and Metal Sonic are both excellent additions to the growing cast of characters, and Sonic's contagious personality shines through in this entry like never before. Sonic 2 felt like the natural progression of the Sonic formula, the next evolutionary step. This feels like a totally different animal, and I really admire the creativity that went into its conception and the incredible talent required to pull it off. This proves that even early on, Sonic was both willing and able to step out of his comfort zone and deliver truly one-of-a-kind experiences. This game easily could have ended up as a lazy cash grab to sell the CD add-on, but the team behind it went the distance to create something special. It now holds the spot as my favorite Sonic game. We'll see how it does against the competition as we progress through the series, but no matter what happens, Sonic CD will always be a truly inspired detour. Thank you so much for watching. I know these videos are probably a little bit awkward and hard to get through at times, but I feel like I'm learning and improving, and I have every intention of continuing to do so. Next up is Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, so make sure you like the video and subscribe for more. See you next time.